Well, good morning and welcome here in the Nordic Pavilion. My name is Tony Agatha. I'm the EU Climate and Environment Envoy, and I'm really happy to be here. I hope you hear me at the end. I got to speak real loud like this. Okay, I'll try to do it. So that's also first house rule. When you hold the microphone, hold it up here so you don't ban the signals. And I would say not like this, but just like this, if that's okay, because otherwise people don't hear. So kind of Ariana Grande style. Yeah. Um, I'm really happy to be here because in the EU, I've been pushing real hard since 2020 to get the issue of climate and security on the radar, not as a separate policy, but as a prism, because I'm convinced that if we don't see the nexus and the connections, we are flying blind in all our policies. There are issues, of course, with migration, with arable land, water stress, fragility in urban areas. We need to see these, preferably to prevent any problem in all our external policies, or redress it once it happens. So I'm really glad to have here three practitioners here at this event that is co-hosted by the European Union, UNEP, UN, CTC, and of course, Cartier and Solar Cooker International. So I'm going to give a brief introduction. Then the three speakers will will say something. I'll ask a few questions, and if we have some time, very happy to invite all of you. Wait a minute. So I would be amiss because I've been instructed to say that I'm very proud that the EU and the member states are the biggest donors to the CTCN. We have currently financing 17 technical assistance projects through the CTCN, focusing on a wide range of clean tech solutions, ranging from mangrove restoration in Colombia, biogas generation in Haiti, hydroponics in Nigeria, and green hydrogen in the Maldives. And why is this so important? Because in Brussels, in my bubble, we speak on a very abstract level about climate and security. But ultimately, the question is, and so, what do you do? And I think that is what we're going to delve in today. What do you do? And that is actually a lot more hopeful than all the worrisome. So let me very quickly turn to Ms. Arieste Ningrum. You are the director of the CTCN, housed within the UNEP, and the CTCN supports climate technology pilots in countries vulnerable to climate change. In the context of the topic today, climate change and security, can you give us a couple of examples on how CTCN helps countries that are suffering from insecurity on the ground caused by climate change?
Thank you so much, Tony, and good morning, everyone. And for those who probably do not know CTCN, because after more than 12 years in the business here, there are still people who do not know CTCN is. So the Climate Technology Center and Network is the implementation arm of technology mechanism established by parties to the UNFCCC back in Cancun in 2010. The CTCN starts operationalization in 2014. So we've been operating since for about 10, 11 years now. And the mandate is actually to help developing countries to take actions on climate technology to implement their mitigation and adaptations commitments. So we really at the heart of when people say that the UNFCCC is about negotiations, but there is a one mechanism that actually help countries on the ground. And that's what essentially what CTCN does. And we thank again the European Union for the outstanding and continued support so far. So a couple of examples. One thing that comes to mind when it talks about the climate security and the and what we do is actually to build resilience through the use of innovative technologies. When we talk about innovative technologies, let's not think about something that's up in the air, like you said. It is something that actually needs to be used locally and adapting to the local context. And one example that actually come from the one community in Nigeria, where we actually help the community build a solar-powered hydroponic system. And why this is helping with the security or conflict situations, because normally women farmers, in order for them to grow the crops, they have to walk a few miles outside. And this is where sometimes there are attacks from the local insurgents, where it's not safe for the woman to actually grow the crops outside there. And of course, the situations is exacerbated because it's an arid area, there is not much water. And therefore, by building the solar-powered hydroponic irrigation system, the community now is able to actually gather and don't have to go outside of the village, but rather they're doing it inside and very close, and they generate a lot more. So now they can grow nutritious food like cucumber, pepper, salad, and everything like that, and using a very sustainable system where they don't need to go also look for water elsewhere. So, and we train, and through this program or through this initiative, we also train the women and youth, 60 of them, to actually build the system. So not build and operate it. So because the idea is it has to stay. When EU or CTCN moves, it doesn't mean that it's gone. There has to be somebody that keep doing it. So the program or the initiative was so successful that now they ask CTCN if we can provide the the storage, the cold storage, because they produce so much product that they wanted actually to sell elsewhere. And of course, that is going to be the next stage of the implementation. So maybe I stop with one example, and I can give you some, so also to allow the other speakers to say a few words.
No, that's great, Yes, so thank you very much. I have a question here, but I have my own question, if I'm allowed.
Yeah.
So you spoke about the vulnerability of women, especially going outside their community, and you're solving this by bringing technology in. To what extent does that make them vulnerable for the outsiders? Because suddenly they have something as well, right? If they can grow their own stuff, if they have water or an irrigation system, does this invite others from the outside? And if so, is it something that you can deploy more broadly to actually redress the danger that you were talking about? Because ultimately that is what you want to cut.
Yes, thank you. I think that's relevant. That would be the next step, because we see that it's working in one community. So now within that community, people also do not need to. The ideal situation would be that we would replicate a similar thing to the similar context in other region or areas of village that experience the same security and conflict situation, for them to avoid actually the generation of conflict. Then they don't have to come to this village in order to take their food. So it's food security, but also in terms of improving resilience and improving the capacity, as well to avoid the conflict.
Changing the security context, basically. Thanks very much. If I may turn to Mr. Keith Vingard, Strategic Partnership Manager of Solar Cookers International. Sorry for my pronunciation. So you visited Bangui in Central African Republic last month and spent a week visiting the pilot communities that are now using solar cookers. So what was your impression of the real impact of this new technology? And is this something that you can truly bring to scale quickly?
Sure, thank you for the question. And thank you to the Nordic Pavilion for hosting us today, to the European Union for the support to the CTCN, and the CTCN and the UN Environment Program for the support for solar cooking as a climate-relevant technology. It was really a tremendous opportunity to spend some time with our collaborators in the Central African Republic. We actually have the CTCN focal point from the Central African Republic with us this morning. If there's time at the end, he'll try to share a comment or two. But Mr. Polycarp Mandayan is with us, so he was hosting me along with our other partners at the University of Bangui, research partner, and then a dedicated gender expert that we had as part of the team, and 2 local NGOs as well. So it's really exciting to see this initial momentum. And for us, we have a data-driven method to kind of determine the impact, or to see what kind of impact solar cooking is having. In a country like the Central African Republic, 99% of the population relies on biomass or other polluting fuels for cooking, which is typically wood or charcoal. And this is across the country. So thanks to the support of the CTCN, And at the request of the government of the Central African Republic, Solar Cookers International, which is a CTCN network member, has been working with our collaborators to pilot or develop prototypes of solar cooking equipment that is able to cook foods that are locally eaten in Central African Republic, and in a way that reduces air pollution. So you have health benefits. It reduces the demand to go access forest resources. So there's impact on deforestation and forest degradation. It also saves time for women who are typically responsible for collecting the wood and fuel and actually doing those cooking activities. And it has the economic impact as well for households that are purchasing fuel or purchasing charcoal. There's a reduction that we've seen in the expenses for each household. So what we have gotten from the data is that households that were previously spending about $20 per month before receiving a solar cooker are now spending about $10 per month. So they're cutting their household fuel expenses about in half. There's also a larger decrease in fuel expenses and in fuel consumption for households that are using the solar cooker more regularly. So we were able to look and see households that use it at least 3 times per week have a bigger decrease in expenses and in consumption compared to households that were only using it once or twice per week, which is great to see that there's a correlation between that regular, reliable usage versus some households that maybe need additional support to adopt and use more frequently. But those are just data points for us to actually be there. There's also a health indicator. We asked a question in the survey about health. At the baseline, about 40% of households reported some respiratory or eye illness in the month before the survey happened. At the time of the post-distribution survey, that number had decreased to about 14%. So it's hard to say that there's a definite causation, but there does seem to be a correlation between increased use of solar cooking and a reduction in health impacts, which is great to see. But then actually being there and reinforcing that with the feedback from the community. So we visited, talked to community members. Seeing the data is one thing, but then hearing community members say, yes, I have been blowing on the cooking fire, so the smoke blows into my eyes. Now I have a solar cooker. I use it when it's sunny, so I don't use it all the time. It's not completely replacing biomass, but it is decreasing the need to use wood and charcoal as a cooking fuel. And so I'm feeling the health impacts. I'm collecting fuel less often from the forest. And this solar cooker is helping me, and my neighbors see it and they're interested in using it as well. So there's some momentum and some interest there, and we're hoping to continue to build on this successful results from the pilot phase.
That's very inspiring. And I have very quick questions, and maybe if you succinctly. So the first one is, do we know how a solar cooker works? Is it with a solar panel, or is it something simple? Second, what does it cost? 3, what about cultural tradition? Because you can introduce something into a context, a social context. That doesn't mean that people accept it simply because they were brought up, they don't trust it. And I recall an old anecdote in the Dutch foreign development aid system where somebody went in with all the best intentions. The women were walking from miles to get water. They said, we need a water pump in the town. And they did it. And then the women complained because they said, now we're done in half an hour and we have to work on the field, which normally the men would do. What is this intervention doing? So that, if you could briefly, before I...
Sure. Yeah, sure. I'll keep it brief. So Solar Cookers International has typically worked with what's called solar thermal cookers, which does not have a PV component. In Central African Republic, we had 3 designs. They're all solar thermal cookers, so they use reflective surfaces to redirect sunlight that creates enough heat that can be absorbed by a black pot. Yeah, exactly. And we have some photos. If anybody has more questions afterwards, we're happy to stick around and show some photos from the project as well. There's also a project in Mali that is using a photovoltaic hybrid system that has a PV panel for the peri-urban area in particular. So there's also maybe some technologies be more appropriate for rural areas, some more appropriate for urban areas. The second, you mentioned the cost. That's an important topic to consider. One of the issues is solar cooking. There's a high upfront cost to access the product or the technology. But then there's no ongoing fuel cost. Yeah. So it ends up being cheaper over time, but you need to overcome that initial cost. So we've been looking at potentially using microfinance or village savings and loans as a way around that issue. And then carbon credits because of the reduction in emissions from cooking as another way to kind of pre-finance the long-term results and the payback from the carbon credits.
So it's that expensive.
So roughly speaking, the box oven technology is somewhere around $200 to locally manufacture, but it has a lifespan of about 10 to 15 years with proper maintenance. Parabolic cooker, similar price tag, but again, that's all up front. If you right.
It's like an electric car.
Right, exactly. So you get the savings over the lifetime of the usage of the product. And then you mentioned cultural adoption or reasons why it might be difficult to adopt. So that's why it's been really critical, especially having somebody like the gender expert as part of our team to kind of help inform what are the cooking practices and what are the expectations. And what we've seen is it's really important to have a comprehensive training program early on so that households are seeing success, seeing that the solar cooker is working, tasting the food and seeing that it is meeting their expectations, right? So if there are certain dishes that demand or require more of a smoky flavor, then there's still the opportunity to cook some meals with improved biomass cook stove, for example, or other cooking technologies. But if you're cooking 25, 30% of your meals with a solar cooker, you're seeing those significant reductions and economic and health benefits.
And the best advertisement is the neighbor, obviously. Thanks so much.
Right.
I'd like to turn to Miss Ileana Avalos, PhD, project coordinator of CATIE. Ileana, I understand that as part of the EU UNEP partnership on climate, environment, peace, and security, CATIE has been working with several local organizations and communities across Central and South America to help them plan and implement peace-oriented, locally led, nature-based solutions for adaptation. Could you tell us about your experience in working with them and highlight how some of these solutions work concretely?
Sure. It's a great question. It's a pleasure to join you today to this conversation representing CATIE. CATIE is the Tropical Agriculture Research and Higher Education Center. We are an international research center based in Costa Rica, and we have more than 70 years of experience in the region across Latin America and the Caribbean. So we try to link science education, outreach, and education and cooperation across Latin America. That's the job that we do. And within CATIE, I work in a unit that is called the Climate Action Unit. This is a multidisciplinary unit. And our approach is trying to recognize that adaptation is not a single action. And this is quite important. It's a process of transformation that begins with incremental changes to reduce immediate risks and evolves into a transformative action. So we work very hard with adaptation pathways. And in this context, we have been implementing this project that it's called PARES. It's part of the EU UNEP Partnership for Climate, Peace and Security. We, at this moment, have 12 projects implementing across Latin America in 6 countries: Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Colombia, and Ecuador. And we are trying to understand the linking between how fragile are the landscapes and how can NBA solutions contribute to reduce that vulnerability. We have to take into account that those landscapes have a double vulnerability. They are vulnerable to climate change for sure, but they do also are fragile in social aspects. So those are fragile landscapes when climate change and social tensions and migrations are mixed. So it's very interesting to work there. So rather than design projects, we do not design the projects in our offices. We co-design the project people, and this is one of the most important part of PARES project, because that co-designing of adaptation pathways. I'm not sure if all the people knows about that concept of adaptation pathways. An adaptation pathway is a sequence of local lead nature-based actions that responds to current risks. You can do a transformative at this moment while opening new options for the future. So it's a mix between a long term, a short term intervention that it's called incremental could be a good option in short term, but we need long term intervention in the region. So, but we can go to a community and to say, you need to change your coffee production for completely. You can do that because this is the livelihood system that they have at this moment. So we need to balance between short-term intervention and long-term intervention. So those pathways start with incremental actions, for example, restoration, water harvest, agroforestry, that bring visible and tangible benefits to rebuild confidence. But over the time, as the dialogue grows and communities advance to doing the things of transformative measures, so for example, they start rethinking the land use of their livelihoods, also diversifying livelihoods, creating new local governance that they might need, and at the beginning they don't need it. So that mix between transport and incremental is quite important, and this is what I mean by integrating landscapes. So in brief, what we do is to connect natural systems to social systems. This is the socio-ecological system approach, trying to connect the both worlds, allowing to adaptation to happen not in isolation. That is what has been taking places in the past. Sometimes we're trying to do it not in isolation, plots, but across territories and institutions. That's what we are trying to do in the region.
Thank you. And to what extent, because when you talk about a short-term, I mean, I know even in my job, if they suddenly say, "Oh, we've got a great new digital portal where you can share your documents," it costs a lot of money
Yeah,
to
it
introduce. A lot of IT experts did it. Nobody's using it because it's like so different. We don't want to learn. So that's in a work situation. So where we have to, I can imagine that it's even more difficult in societies. Do you specifically look for change agents in that? Because it starts with a different mindset, right? I mean, you cannot just intervene and put it there. It starts with people wanting and understanding and accepting and asking for this. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. And the way that we design the projects, because the Paris project work with grants. So we have 12 grassroots organizations in each of the landscapes, and we help them to coordinate the landscape intervention. And one of the most important part is that we do diagnosis with communities to understand and map the social ecological systems, understanding livelihood systems, the social ecosystem systems, the risk, the conflicts, the governance that does here, and understand what the community wants to do in a short term, in a medium term, and in long term ago. And across all the experiences that we have, there are like three learnings that we have been seeing that maybe can make response to your question. First is that it's very important that all the scaling up actions can happen without networks. Networking, the learning, the peer-to-peer learning experiences is crucial. And in this moment, we have 12 projects on landscape level with 31 combination of MBS in different scales. NBS, National Based Solutions, sorry. We have 12 projects with 31 national based solutions implemented, and the way that they collaborate between landscapes and understanding the different scales of intervention is crucial. So yeah, we develop the interventions communities, the grassroots organizations, but we do also have the linking in the different levels of scales of the governance. So we also work with the Minister of Agriculture and with other key stakeholders at landscape level, because if not, that only will be a very good pilot project. And we have a lot of very good pilot projects in the region, but we need to scaling up that. And this pass for the understanding the mismatch between scales, the mismatch between socio-ecological system and the social system, and to understand that solutions need enable conditions. and I think that this is the last point that I want to take. Enable conditions, finance, governance, and institutions.
Okay, I see that Executive Director Inger Andersen is arriving, but I gave so much time to you two. I feel that the Director, Arieste, is there something that inspired you that you said, I absolutely have to say this as an example?
Yes, this is showing that the actions from what parties are negotiating, the mechanism that they created, and how we actually mobilize everyone, including, good morning, Inger, including the governments. The governments play important role here. We have a lot of good stories from the communities helped by implementing partners, academia, private sector. But the government also the one that bring us to the attention to the community. And I think it's a powerful connections that you see from the top, from the ideations down to the implementation. And I think we need to maintain this connection. We can work together. But like you both already said, this shouldn't stop here. We need scale up. We need this to be replicated because it really builds resilience of communities, and from communities it builds resilience of the country and preparing them for worsening climate in the near future. So I think I stop with that, but I would like to invite everyone here to partner, continue partnering with us, continue partnering with the network members and the governments as well, so to bring the community the best solutions that they can have.
Well, thank you very much. Can I have a large applause for these three leaders?
May I just say one more thing? The impact report just published last night, and it's available on the CTCN website under the report, and we will do a lot of social media campaign. It's a beautiful report. It shows the number of thousands of direct beneficiaries of this program. It's really, really good work, and I encourage you all to help sharing, dissemination, this information. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And before, Inger, I give you the floor, I also want to give you a brief update on what we discussed. So we had excellent examples moving away from just the bubble where I am in Brussels saying climate is security, oh, it's terrible, to what are we doing in terms of solar cooker initiatives, dealing with traditional and cultures, dealing with pilots in a sociological context, because you can't just come in and intervene. It has to settle down, talking about the upfront costs of it all, talking about peace and security, hydroponics. I thought it was an excellent example how, especially gender, which came up a couple of times, the vulnerability of women in all of this and the solutions to help women irrigate and work, but also scale up these examples so that what you solve here in terms of security, you can solve elsewhere. It's an inadequate summation, but I just wanted to give you a brief update. I'm so proud that you're here. I want to thank you for your leadership at UNEP. I see you at Plastics a lot, but it's good to see you here and yesterday. So I'd like to give you the floor, and I'm going to give you my seat because we don't have a lectern, if that's okay with you. And gentlemen, please applause for Inger Andersen from UNEP.
Thank you very much, and it's a real pleasure to be here. And now I'm going to struggle because I like to stand up, but it's fine. Look at this. Wow. That's EU at your service here. Thank you very much. No, look, I mean, you've heard about solutions from these brilliant people who are bringing it to the front line. And so this is what when we're looking at what's happening in the climate space, and when we begin to understand then those push and pull factors, we can see that conflicts are rarely.
You have to hold it up here, sorry, yes, and then close.
Okay. Conflicts are rarely single-caused. We know this. There's like peeling an onion, but somewhere in the layers of that onion, there is climate. Very, very frequently. And that should not come as a surprise, as you say, but yet we get surprised. I mean, we saw what was happening in Sudan. We had predicted and projected what was going to happen in El Fasher. We were clear that after failure of rainfall, poor governance is under stress, and so on and so forth. There are other factors at play, of course. Don't get me wrong. But somewhere in the mix, there's climate. And so when we see that and we understand the climate water connection, which everybody gets, these cascading impacts from water stress, from, on the one hand, Mauritania to Afghanistan. If you just paint a map across that belt, the first belt hit by climate change. This is also often where you have some of the deepest and most complex conflict regions. Why? Discuss. The issue is obviously that somewhere in that mix there is climate. And the piece, of course, is that in those areas, it's those who are the most vulnerable exposed, which is why the kind of solutions we're hearing about are so important. Syria is just emerging into the daylight from decades of oppression and unbelievable horror. Let's recall what the Syrian uprising in 2010. I invite you to draw a map of the, yes, okay, I'm learning this. I invite you to draw a graph of the rainfall projections in the 70s, 80s, and 90s and into the 2010s. And it goes like this, right? And so it was the people of Daraa that simply were displaced, and they had settled around the city of Daraa in 2010. They joined the sort of Arab Spring movement, and the next thing you know, we get this catastrophic situation with an outflow of millions and a catastrophe. And as Syria now is trying to find its feet, what happens? An incredible drought hits that bangs down the irrigation system so that it's not working and drying up tributaries. And of course, what happens next? You get an incredible hard forest fires in the summer. So these countries that are trying to pull themselves out of conflict just get whacked, which is why the community-based work is so important, because that's where you can create at least a degree of resilience while this whacking happens. And so, considering that 70% of countries are most vulnerable to climate change are also those that fight with fragility, this is a very real challenge. And the World Bank has published just last year precisely a study that speaks to this issue about fragility and water, fragility and drought. And it's self-evident to anybody who reads the story. That is why we value so very much the multilateral collaboration with the EU and with the EU countries, because that has been a very critical partnership for us and I'm very, very grateful for the support that we have received through the work that you are hearing about here, plus, things that you are not hearing about. We try to, in the UN, EU UNEP partnership for climate, environment and peace and security, we try to really push these issues at the ground level while also engaging at the top of the government level to try to get the policies in place at the more systemic, strategic way. In fact, my country director was just recently in Syria, and we have an office in Sudan, and I just sent somebody to Gaza. The point is that this is important stuff. The environment is critical, and even the day when the guns stop firing, there's going to be decades of reconstructions thereafter. The climate security mechanism, which the EU is also very supportive of, it's a joint initiative under the Security Council that deals with how do you move from climate impacts towards security. It's a very important element, and we work together with the political departments in the UN, and ourselves, we come with the environment arm, and our friends at UNDP, they come with the development arm, and it's a really important partnership. And in fact, I just briefed the Security Council on an issue just last week, precisely on the issue of climate and environment and conflict. But the bottom line is that moving this stuff forward is hard, and it takes efforts, because solar cookers and hydroponics and so on, it's the hard slog at the local level. And at the end of the day, it has to work for the markets and the farmers and the women who are doing the activities, etc. And so this, in a fragile setting, is often where the web has been destroyed, especially if people have been moved or displaced, and or if the very foundation of their society is gone. This is where we greatly value that collaboration. The CTCN is a secret mechanism, that the mechanism in the climate talks that no one has heard of. But you know, it's absolutely critical. We all know about the finance mechanism, but the technology element is absolutely critical. What's the point of having the finance if you don't actually have the technology? And there's no breaking of copyrights and no breaking of legislation and so on, patents, because this is a matchmaking made in heaven. So look, here we are. There's a lot that we have to do. The collaboration is strong. The partnership is there. The finance is inadequate, which is why we need to push for finance. As we're looking at the emissions gap report, my last point, as we're seeing where we are heading right now, it is absolutely clear that the financing needs will become greater because we are climate procrastinating. The European region is the only region that actually made a significant decrease in their NDC promises. Now they have to follow through and deliver. But this is important. We need to see everybody else step up. We are now heading, if we do what we promised to do in the current NDCs, we are heading to a 2.4 to 2.6 degree world. And that's if we do both the conditional and the unconditional. So it's hands on deck, lean in, get this done, work at the community level while we insist on climate action. Thank you very much, the EU, to our colleagues here who've been speaking about this important work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So thank you very much, Inger. We have 5 minutes, and I think it's the opportunity to everyone's patiently listening to open the floor maybe for a question or two. I look at the organizers. Is that okay? Who? I think the gentleman behind you was first. Also some ladies, I hope. Don't be shy.
Thank you. My name is Jan Wolf from Buddhist Tsuchi Foundation. We are also a member of CTCN for a couple of years, and we have partnered with solar cookers as well in the past. I'm just wondering, we have some projects in some countries like Africa where we help communities to provide support for adaptation and resilience. And I'm just wondering if we would like to scale up our efforts utilizing CTCN, how we should proceed. What is the process to receive that support?
That's an excellent question. I'm going to take a couple of more. So the gentleman before, and then the lady in color.
Hello, my name is Alan Bigelow with Solar Cookers International, and I would actually like to invite Polycarp Mandian for just a few words. It'll be in French, and then I'll just summarize what he has to say. So, Polycarp Mandian, vous pouvez venir un peu? We have been working directly with Polycarp in the Central African Republic. He is the NDE, the nationally determined entity, or in French, the Entité Nationale Déterminée. I just would like for him to share some of his perspective, the work that we've done together, thanks to the CTCN and the European Commission.
Bonjour à tout le monde. Je m'appelle Mandayen Charlemagne Polycarpe. Je travaille au ministère de l'Environnement et du Développement durable. Je suis l'entité nationale désignée de la République centrafricaine auprès du CTCN international. Et vraiment, je remercie beaucoup l'Union européenne et je remercie beaucoup CTCN. Je remercie aussi SCI parce qu'ils nous ont aidés vraiment à faire produire l'effort solaire au niveau du pays. Et vraiment, je remercie beaucoup encore parce que ils ont choisi 4 sites pilotes qui sont, comme c'est un projet pilote, Ils ont choisi 4 sites pilotes et voilà maintenant ce projet a été réalisé sur les 4 sites pilotes. C'est ça qui me permet aussi de remercier beaucoup les partenaires techniques et financiers pour continuer dans ce sens et pour vulgariser d'un moment à l'autre le cuisson solaire sur le territoire national de la République centrafricaine.
Thank you. So Polycarp was just saying thank you to the entities, the European Commission, the CTCN, for funding this effort. We've worked together, so we're very grateful for all the partners involved. And this effort has had an impact in his country in 4 pilot sites, and these were 4 sites that were just in the area around Bangui, the capital of Central African Republic. But basically, he was also introducing himself and his role along with the others in the partnership. Okay, but then I'll go with Mo.
Merci beaucoup pour des suggestions. Je remercie beaucoup encore de plus. Je demande aux partenaires vraiment pour la vulgarisation de ce projet. Et comme j'avais dit au départ, pour que ce projet soit pris sur l'étendue du territoire de la République centrafricaine, mais il faut d'abord renforcer la capacité des bénéficiaires pour qu'ils puissent avoir l'attitude à manipuler ce kit pour que d'ici demain, il peut avancer encore. Et renforcer aussi les communautés locales pour la fabrication eux-mêmes sur leur localité. Et je remercie aussi l'appui du CTCN qui est toujours prêt auprès de la République centrafricaine pour appuyer la République centrafricaine sur le plan technique et ainsi que les autres. Et je remercierai aussi les autres partenaires s'ils sont là. La République centrafricaine vraiment a des bras ouverts pour accueillir tous les projets qui vont dans le sens de lutter contre les effets néfastes du changement climatique.
Polycarp says thanks again for everybody involved, but he's getting down to an important point that in order to continue the spread of this technology, this is going to require more resources. So he is asking for more resources and he's inviting more help and to be involved in his country and also through this effort funded by the European Commission and CTCN. The Central African Republic, which called for this help, is an excellent example, a country-led example for other countries to follow. So please come and take a look at the project. And again, he's very thankful for this opportunity to share his words. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Et vous avez tout à fait raison avec votre point. Now, for the others, especially because I think you also mentioned that it's very important for localities, to your point exactly, to make stuff themselves, faire des choses eux-mêmes. Merci beaucoup. Yeah, so we're okay. The last question, and then we'll couple them with the question of the gentleman behind me.
Sure. As it links very well to what was said, that's why I insist on asking that question. My name is Anne Barr, and I'm from the Women and Gender constituency, also partnering with the SCI and with the CTCN on gender integration into climate technology transfer and development. For the scaling, the gender impacts and also the gender barriers and constraints are really essential to be understood. And my question would be on what are the advocacy and also instruments that we can put in place to ensure that specifically the access to finance for women's groups at the very local level who do not afford to pay for loans, maybe microcredit, but then it must be really regulated so that it works. What can be done? And specifically here in this COP where we continue negotiating about climate finance and the quality of climate finance, what can we do to ensure that for the scaling up of such successful initiatives, we have the right financial models and the right financial instruments? Because I don't think they are in place today.
That sounds to me like an extremely tough question. No, thank you very much. So we have 2 questions. One is how to get involved. Who would then take the finance one? Because I'm just the moderator, so I can cop out. Anyway, why don't you start first?
Okay, very, very brief. When you say you get involved, well, the first thing is, of course, as a network member, you can always express your interest in any of the requests that we posted in our website. That's the way it works. Basically, country would submit request to CTCN. We work with them to formulate a response plan, and this response plan is put in our website, and we call for expression of interest. May I also mention about scale up, because I think this is the point that raised by a gentleman from the car also. So yes, this is a questions $1 million or more than $1 million question for everyone, because I think there are a lot of good work that the CTCN has done, but at the moment it stops there. So we do need to think strategically of how we actually can connect the success that we already have at this technical assistance level, replicate them, scale them up appropriately, and we work together with countries, and that is very important to scale up these efforts. And the CTCN has done things sporadically, I would say ad hoc, where we, at the request of country, we try to find the source of finance, connect them with the entity, funding entity as appropriate, and try to explore opportunities. But we need to do more systematically. And funny enough, it goes back again to the negotiation room, where currently the function of the CTC has been reviewed. And I think parties, including the one that I'm sitting here, are fully aware what needs to happen. And we hope that we can collaborate with the different funding entities in the future going forward of explore and how to bring all this good initiative and make larger impact on the grounds.
Well, I'm sure with these acoustics, they have heard you in the grill. So thank you very much. On the finance, does anyone have something to say on that?
I can try. I have the same question myself. How to make that happen? But what we're trying to do is say, solar cooking at scale does have a business case. People are saving money. There is a carbon credit opportunity that can be tapped into when we reach the scale that we're trying to achieve. So if we can bundle or put that together and tap into a locally run microfinance institution, village savings and loan, some way to help the women that are hoping to use these solar cookers access that technology and accumulate those savings over time. If we have some upfront patient capital that allow us to do that, then we start to see at scale thousands of tons of CO2 that are avoided because women in Central African Republic are using solar cookers. So I think there are the right pieces to make the case that it's possible, but we're still working to figure out how to make that happen. And we're hoping this pilot, the success that we've had from this pilot, can help us make that case to whoever might be willing to work with us on that going forward.
That's excellent. Now, so personally, this is not an EU statement. I would love to just hand over $400 to women in their hand and let them make their own decisions, because I have a strong sense that they know what they need, whether it's the roof or the gate or the cooker. You would like to add? Very briefly, then we have to wrap.
First, to scaling up, to scaling up, we really need to work deeply in the multi-sectoral gaps. We can continue working in silos, just in different silos of the work. We need to work in coordination, and that is the mismatch between scales and sectors. And the other thing is that solutions must be built up in the communities and take into account what vulnerable people need and wants, because it's an error if we try to build up solutions in the top down and not think about what women need or want, because we can think what they need, but it's different what they really feel to need in the ground. So this is crucial. And third, it's important to think in the intersection between mitigation and adaptation. We can continue thinking in that in separate ways, and this is part of funding. We can reach more fundings if we work together with that synergies.
Okay, well, let's end on the Spice Girls. Tell me what you want, what you really, really want, because that's where it starts. I want to thank you so much for everything you're doing and also your excellent presentations. Thank the audience for your attention, and let's all work together for a better world. Thanks a lot.